All right. Hello, Fortinas brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is March 19th, 2024. And, brothers, we're going to have, and sisters, we are going to have some fun tonight. I had an idea for this video because of a comment in the Ministry Revealed forum about Judas. A lot of people have wanted to know and to understand, even over the years outside of this ministry, because we've touched on it in the past, but we're going to be able to bring, I believe, new revelation to it tonight. A lot of people wanted to understand, why is there this confusion, this discrepancy between the two forms in which Judas has died. And so that's what we're going to go into tonight. And we're gonna touch on some things in relation to the last video as we get started first, to bring clarity to one piece, which is exciting. And then we're going to touch on a couple other things, and we're going to lead into it and show some of these things within Scripture that we know are things that haven't yet been fulfilled, to be able to make the point about this end time Judas character and what is yet to be fulfilled about him, and what happens to him in the end of days. All right, so that's going to be the bulk and the crux of what we're going to go into, and it's going to bring clarity and understanding to this end of days Judah, which is the revelation, which is the understanding of the two ways that Judas dies in Scripture. Many of you who have been around for a little while, you will have heard me say a number of times that, yes, within the Gospels, we know, and we've been able to reveal here now for over 6.5 years, that there's so much written in the Gospels that is prophetic. And it is way more than just the discourses. We've been able to show that because the answer is found in the differences in the Gospels. The differences that are in the Gospels about the same story spoken in a different way reveals something prophetic. And we've been doing this for 6.5 years, showing this, that these differences are not just, another perspective. They are absolutely Bible prophecy. And what I've said over the years is that we know that, like I said, even though Luke and Mark, so in the Synoptic Gospels, there's a lot of things in there as well. But when it comes to Matthew's Gospel, I know it's been fulfilled, okay? I get it. But there is so much prophetic insight left to be fulfilled in the Gospel of Matthew that sometimes I even wonder if Matthew has been fulfilled yet. That's how crazy it is. There is so much. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're going to see this as we get into it again tonight. Because even though, of course, some things and many of the things were fulfilled in Matthew, so many things are still yet to be fulfilled. Oh, of course, there's a lot in Mark and there's a lot in Luke as well. But the bulk of it is ridiculous when it comes to how much is still left there to be fulfilled in Matthew. And yet, pastors can read it and see it for what it was. But you see, that's something we've talked about many times as well, which is the differences in the Gospels. Once you understand them, once they've been revealed to you, and you realize that the difference in the Gospels and not having understood them is because everybody's foundation is in Matthew, that's how the churches have been able to go and put together these stories, because their foundation is in Matthew. And they'll only pull a little bit from Mark and a little bit from Luke. And when something doesn't fit or make sense within the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, they'll just stick with whatever Matthew says. And so nobody really pays attention to what all these other differences are, except for those who have been really spending time in their scriptures and reading the Word. They really get to understand these things. And I shouldn't say understand, but notice that there are these differences that can't be explained away by simply saying it's perspective. And you're going to see as we go into this that I'm going to show you a write-up from a very great website I like, but the write-up on it is precisely trying to explain it away as just a perspective. But when we go through it, you're going to see there is no way of explaining that through perspective. He tries, but it just falls completely flat. So we're going to show what it means, why it's there, and understand what's going to happen to him this time. And I'll bet you we can even show the year, because we know there's a reason and a purpose for when Christ is going to do something again, because he's got to save some people. So we'll get into that. We'll go in through all of this. And, let me give you an example just before getting going. For everybody that's new here in the ministry, let me show you a couple of examples. In Luke chapter 23, Jesus is going to the cross, and he's arrayed in a gorgeous robe. It means radiant, white, gorgeous. If you go to Mark's gospel, it says that Jesus was arrayed in purple. If you go to Matthew's gospel, you see that Jesus was arrayed in, scarlet. So we always like to say, were these guys colorblind when they were recording this? When they went and asked the people in Luke's, why does one have a gorgeous white robe, one have purple, and one have scarlet? Well, who do you know who's arrayed in a gorgeous white, beautiful robe? A bride. The bride of Christ is arrayed in a beautiful, white, gorgeous robe. What about purple and scarlet? Well, let me show you in Revelation 17 that purple and scarlet are the colors of the woman who's riding the beast. See, the woman in Revelation 17:4, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, the same purple and the same scarlet from Mark and Matthew. There is no gorgeous white radiant robe in Revelation during tribulation. So what's going on here? Well, the answer can be found in many places, but let me show you one very significant place that directly connects to this. This is to show you the differences within the Gospels. When Jesus goes to the cross and he's saying his final words, he says in Luke 23:46, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." Okay, bang, he's got his arms and he's like, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Beautiful, right? Going to be with the Father in his presence. Look what Mark says. And we won't go to Matthew's because Matthew says the same thing. But listen to what Matthew says. My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And again, Matthew says the same thing. The word forsaken means to leave behind. Wait a second. Luke had a gorgeous white radiant robe like a bride. Jesus says, into your arms I commend my spirit, Father. And bang, Jesus is in the presence of the Father. But in Mark, he's wearing purple. In Matthew, he's wearing scarlet. In Mark's, it says that Jesus was proclaiming he was being left behind, and that in Matthew, he's proclaiming being left behind. Do you think Jesus believed he was being left behind, or do you think he was giving us a message? Why does Luke not get left behind, yet Mark and Matthew are left behind as purple and scarlet? This, brothers and sisters, is the revelation of the differences within the synoptic gospels, or within the gospels themselves, but in particular when comparing the synoptic gospels of Luke, Mark, and Matthew. Here's another one of the famous ones. Jesus is seen coming in, and it's the word in, a cloud, singular. When you go to Mark's discourse, so this is connected to pre-trib time. When you go to Mark's discourse, we see the coming of the Son of Man. It says, after that tribulation. You didn't see that in Luke's. Again, it says in, just like Luke's did, but this time it's plural clouds. And it's after that tribulation. When you go to Matthew, this one's awesome when comparing these differences. Listen to what Matthew says. In Matthew chapter 24, at the coming of the Son of Man, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So spoken of differently, but also being after a portion of tribulation. And what does it say about the coming of the Son of Man? The word in is actually the word on in the Greek translation. And the word is in or on the clouds. Why? Because in Matthew, it's at his return, coming feet down on the Mount of Olives, coming on the clouds when the whole world will see him from one end unto the other. You see what's happening? You get to see that pre, mid, and post are all true. They relate to Luke, Mark, and Matthew. The first will be last, the last will be first. Matthew, Mark, Luke becomes Luke, Mark, Matthew. This is the revelation of the differences within the Gospels that we try to get everybody to understand first. If you come to this video or go to right here, ministryrevealed.com, and go to the menu box, click intro page, and on that intro page, watch the first 4 videos. Just like right here, watch the first 4 videos. The first one is a 22-minute intro. It'll give you an understanding of what the next 3 are. The one that follows is a 30-minute Bible study, all just from Scripture, showing you the types of things I just showed you, proving to you that there is a different story being spoken about to different groups of people from Luke and Mark and Matthew. Luke is the pre-trib bride of Christ. Mark is the world, the Gentiles grafted into the house of Israel, the church that's not ready, that's asleep, that aren't diligently in Christ, that aren't loving, repentant, seeking Him. That's the world. That's the church that's asleep. Theirs is the great multitude rapture in the 7th year of seals. And then you'll realize that Matthew's is the 7 years of trumpets. And at the end, in the 7th year of trumpets, you have the Lord returning feet down on the Mount of Olives at the start of that final 14th year. You say, well, wait a second, that's crazy. Well, you know what? When you go into this intro video, after you've gone into the second one that talks about these things with the differences within the Gospels to reveal to you who they're speaking to, when you get to the next one, it'll be about the revelation of the 14 years. And I promise you, when you begin with the understanding of the Gospels, and then you realize the revelation of the years, because then you can see it in the discourses. All of these differences in the discourses are for a reason. And that reason applies to the Gospels as a whole, as you're going to see here as we go forward tonight. And then when you go to the 4th video, it's a big video. The other ones are 22 minutes to half an hour. But the last one is about 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's called It's All Because of Matthew. And why is it so important? Because, as I said in the beginning, when everybody is taught from the foundation of Matthew's gospel for hundreds and hundreds of years, Mark and Luke have fallen by the wayside because it was never understood who they were speaking to. Is it anybody's fault? No. I believe that it just wasn't yet the time. And that's what's been happening here for 6.5 years. If you take the time to dig into these things, just starting with those first 4 videos, and then you could scroll down and watch some of the rest of them, it will open your mind, it will blow your mind, and you will be so excited because you will now begin to understand Scripture. It will make so much more sense to you than it ever has before, and especially when it comes to prophecy. It is the prophecy. It is the revelation of the open book. It is all the books of Daniel, of Genesis, of Luke, Mark, all book after book, dozens of books being opened here, revealing the understanding of prophecy. It doesn't mean we understand everything. It means we've been given the key to understand far more than has ever been revealed before. And we have shown it in hundreds and hundreds of videos. It's incredible. So that's what I always suggest to everybody. Watch the first 4 videos in that playlist, and it'll really make sense to you. The other thing I want to say is, please remember, the ministry, brothers and sisters, is always in need of support. Here, in the ministry as a whole, but also for our brother Steve, Olwini Steve Lipsy. There he is. So this is our brother Steve in Uganda, and they were giving out clothes here just recently. And, it's amazing to see the things and the work that they're doing for the testimony of the Lord there. His wife was just robbed just a few days ago. Her phone was stolen, as well as $140 that Steve had just given her to go get some groceries and foods and stuff. So, these things that they have to deal with. Brothers and sisters, what these guys go through there is beyond anything I think most of us have ever experienced in our lives. And it's all for the Lord, with the truth of salvation first and foremost, with Bibles, with testimonies, And then once they're saved and they start to understand Scripture, they teach them the revelation of the differences in the Gospels so that they can grow in their understanding and be ready for the time that we believe is near at hand. So if you're able to, if it's in your heart, if you're feeling led, please help support the ministry. You can do it anytime. You can click on this link right here. When you do, we have our email, our address right here, or you can go to PayPal. All right. So with that, let's get this party started. So as I told you in the beginning, sip of coffee first. As I told you in the beginning, what I want to share first is what we spoke about in this last video. Just to bring a little bit more, one point of clarity, because I caught it as I was doing my study. Then I ended up getting sidetracked and I completely forgot about it. And then a brother made a comment in this video, under the video in the comments, about the difference with seraphim and cherubim. And I thought, oh yes, that's what I had forgotten to look into. And so it was a great comment because I want to show it to you. Okay, we were talking about Ezekiel chapter 1. And in Ezekiel chapter 1, we have Jesus as the Son of Man, right? Ezekiel is a typology of Jesus as the Son of Man. He sees the 4 living creatures. These 4 living creatures, we know when we go when we went to Ezekiel 10, that it's all about the cherubim. The word cherub and cherubim is used 20 times. 20 times in Ezekiel chapter 10, letting us know that these are the cherubim. And these 4 living creatures are the cherubim. And each one of these 4 creatures all have 4 faces, like I was saying. So you have north, west, south, east, and if they all are moving east, and they're all, if I'm looking down from the north, from the north, if I'm looking down from the north, everything I'm seeing on all 4 faces are eagles. If I'm over here on the east, everything I'm seeing is 4 lions. That's how it works. They don't turn their heads like that because they all move in the same direction as their being, and they all have 4 heads. But what else did they have? And this was the catch. Every one of them had 4 wings. Do you know what creatures have 4 wings in Scripture? The cherubim. It is the cherubim plural, that have the 4 wings. So guess what? Whose throne do you think we're seeing here? Jesus' throne. Jesus' throne, remember? We have the Lucifer type who fell, who was the covering cherub. And the covering cherub is the beast. He's the one from Revelation 13, the one from the sea. And that one from the sea is the picture of Lucifer. And Lucifer is a picture of the beast, the Antichrist beast. And what is he? Antichrist. He's trying to take over Christ's dominion from Christ. But what do we know about the seraphim? Well, when we go into Revelation chapter 4 again, we see that these ones aren't called living creatures, but these ones are called the 4 beasts. And these 4 beasts, they had what? They had, the first beast was like a lion. Wait a second. There's not 4 faces on these. They don't all have 4 faces. There are simply 4 beasts, of which one is a lion, one is a calf, one is a man, and one is an eagle. And look at what these 4 beasts have. 6 wings, brothers and sisters. So not only do they not all have 4 faces, they're not called living creatures, they're called beasts, and one beast is a lion. Okay? He was like a lion, I should say. The next one was like a calf. They didn't have 4 faces, but they did have 6 wings. And who has 6 wings, brothers and sisters? The 6 wings are the seraphim. What is Satan? Satan isn't Lucifer, as we've been teaching. Satan is Satan. Lucifer is Lucifer. Lucifer was a cherubim. Satan is a seraphim. Satan is the one that fell from around God's throne, the Father's throne. Hello. So what do you think we're looking at here? The same throne of the Son of Man? Nope. This is the Father's throne. This is who is around the Father's throne, the Lord God Almighty. These are the ones that have 6 wings, brothers and sisters. The difference between Ezekiel and the difference between Revelation 4 is one is Jesus' throne covered with the surrounding seraphim, and this one is God's throne, the Father's throne, God the Son and God the Father, and this one are different beasts, and these ones have 6 wings. They are the seraphim. Hello. Makes a lot more sense, right? How many times have we taught on these things? We know that Lucifer and Satan are different beings, and we know that Lucifer is the beast, and we know from that beast, we've understood that from Revelation 16, 3 spirits like frogs come out of 3 people, out of the beast, the false prophet, and Satan. Hello. And the dragon, right? How is that possible if 2 of them are supposed to be one? Here's another great example to bring more clarity that these are in fact 2 thrones. One is the Son's, one is the Father's. Now, check this out. I came across this in a video that a brother had shared with me the other day, and I can't recall. It strikes me as something I've brought up at some point in the past, but I want to share it with you again because it was a long time ago, so much so that I can't quite remember if I did or not. The word truth in Hebrew is this word right here. Okay? This word right here, and you got to remember the Hebrews go from right to left. This word is Aleph Mem Tav. The word for truth, brothers and sisters, is Aleph Mem Tav. Now, why am I bringing it up? Check it out. Aleph is what? 1, but it's also the beginning, right? And what have we been talking about for a long time now? We know that the count for the beginning of the days will begin in Sivan, Taurus. Okay? What else do we know? Well, the second letter in truth is the letter Mem, which is the number 13. Well, 13, does that ring a bell to any of us? How about we know that the pre-trib begins from a count from Taurus? And then when the tribulation begins at Feast of Trumpets, how long is the tribulation? It's 13 years, because at the end of 13, to start the 14th year, the Lord is returning, feet down on the Mount of Olives, just like Zechariah 14. And then what? What's the next letter? We got Aleph, the beginning, which is a count that will start in Taurus. We got Mem, like 13 years of tribulation. But we also have it as what? It also represents the number 40. Well, in the 13 years, before the 13 years start, and the final 14th year when the Lord is here dealing with the enemies, what do we know happens? Well, the Lord is also coming for 40 days within those 50 days, as we've taught before. But what else is there? Well, the last letter is Tav. It was Aleph, Mem, Tav, 22. What do we know about 22, brothers and sisters? In the big picture of the end of days, we know the whole story is actually 22 years. It's the Jacob story, the 7 easy years, then he gets Leah, then he works 7 more years to complete the time for Rachel, then he works 6 more years for his father-in-law for the cattle, and at the end of 20, he makes a covenant with his father-in-law, and then what do we have? 22, the new beginning. What is it at the end of days? It is 22 years of the end of days. It's 7 easy years, 7 years of seals, 7 years of trumpets. These 7 years, nobody would really recognize anything except there's a group of people that are really being woken up in the world by the Spirit. They're being prepared for the pre-trib bride of Christ, ready to be taken, spirit-filled, like Romans 8 says, spirit-filled in Christ. We don't talk about it too much, but we've talked about it a number of times. We've broken it down all the way back to creation. Because the storyline at the end of days is 7 years of seals and 7 years of trumpets. But we know at the end of the 13th year of tribulation, the Lord has returned, like we saw in Matthew 24 there, immediately after the tribulation of those days, is when the Lord returns to start the 14th year, feet down on the Mount of Olives. And when he fulfills that final 14th year with the treading of the winepress, destroying the enemies, Satan being bound, the beast and the false prophet being thrown into the lake of fire, when that's all over, what is it? It's the final Jubilee. We generally call it the 15th year, but in the big picture, it's the 22nd year. In the bigger picture of everything, we know that it's the count of the Shemitah cycles. This is why anybody who's telling you we're in the Jubilee year this right now, or last year, or next year, and they're trying to say that's when the Jubilee is, well then you can understand that their understanding of the end of days is off. Because when the final year of tribulation is over, that's when it's the restoration of all things and all land being given back and everything forgiven and everything else. So what do we know? Begins in Taurus, ends at 22, and in the middle is 13 years of tribulation. And what is that called? It's the Hebrew word for truth. Pretty wild, right? I had to share that with you guys because I was just like, man, you know, now that I think about it a bit more, I think I've shared about it in the past as well. You see, we know that Taurus is Aleph. It's the ox, right? It's the head of the ox. We know Jesus is the beginning, is Taurus. And he's what? He's also Tav. He's the cross. Do you know what 13 is? Well, what do we know happens in the 13th year of tribulation, guys? What happens in the 13th year of tribulation? What happens at the end of it? Something called again happens, which will be tied in a little bit into what we're going to show in relation to Judas. What do we know happens? The again is going to happen. And look at the word mem. It means water, and it means what? Water, chaos, mighty, and blood. Water and blood. Water and blood. Isn't that interesting? Do you remember we've shared on this in, I think it's Hebrews chapter 9, that the one who is the testator, right, in Hebrews 9, 16 and 17, for where a testament is, there must also the necessity be, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is a force after men are dead, otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator lives. We know why Jesus is going to do it again. It's not for the salvation of all of us. He's already done that. He's already saved the world. Do you remember why he's doing it? For a portion or a person of the priestly line. Do you know that all the workers of the end of days are priests? Do you know that those that are working during seals are a priestly line that we shared in the last video? The last video or second last video? And we've shared about it many, many times. We know that the priestly line is that Levitical line. That Levitical line that we showed in that chart. That from the Levitical line, it went into these priestly lines under them. And it led now under through Aaron and through Moses and them, and goes all the way through. And we showed how there's a portion of the Gentiles in the end of days who are from the pre-trib group being chosen to remain. They are the priestly line. And then what do we know about the 144,000? They're sealed in the 7th year of seals. They work during trumpets, and they're also what? They're also a Levitical line. They're a priestly line as well. We know that Jesus in Scripture, well, even back in Numbers, God told Moses and Aaron, that the Levites, the Levites, the priestly line through them, belong to the Father. They belong to the Father. And we see in John's Gospel, which we're going to talk about a little later tonight, that in John's Gospel, Jesus says, "These are they which the Father gave me, and of them I have lost none but this one." So who do you think he's going to have to save? Why is Christ going to do this thing again? Because he cannot lose what the Father gave him. They don't belong to him. They're his, and they're the Father's, and the Father gave them to him. So yes, of course, they're Christ's, but they're from the Father who gave them to him. And they've been sealed, remember? They've been sealed with God's mark for the 144. They've been sealed. They have the Father's name written on their foreheads. So if anything happens to any of this priestly line, they can't be left, no matter what happens to them. Hence the reason for Jesus doing this thing again. It becomes so clear when we understand all of these revelations. It's really incredible. And here's another one, just by seeing the word truth. Taurus, 13, water and blood, and then 22 when it's all over. The Hebrew alphabet is the picture of 22 years of the end of days. We revealed it through Scripture before we even realized that it was the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It's crazy how it happens. It's so awesome. So now, let's go and start getting into this Judas character. We're going to see that Judas, there's many times, of course, where Judas's name is used, but you have to make sure you're getting the right one, of course. But when you do, you see where it's used. Okay? You'll see where it's used. You can see where it's used. And you're going to see a point here where the last time within the Gospels, the last time Judas's name is used in the Gospels is John chapter 18. To us here in this ministry, that is extremely, extremely significant. Where we see him in other books, for Judas Iscariot, it ends in Acts chapter 1. And what's interesting is the one in Acts chapter 1 is where Judas kills himself and is like splattered mush. And people try to correlate this splattered mush to having hung himself. Some will even go as far as saying he hung himself on a tree. I've heard this before. He's hung himself on a tree that was hanging over a cliff on a branch, and he hung himself on it, killed himself hanging on a branch. The branch broke, he fell to the ground and splattered. That's pretty creative, right? That's a pretty interesting one. So we're going to get into this and talk about why these things are so important and what they tell us. Because, you see, how many times do we have to show the importance of the revelation of these opened books? These books right here, Hosea, Zechariah, John, Acts, Ezekiel, Psalms, Genesis, Hebrews, Exodus, Judges, have all opened to us in what we call the revelation of the open books. And John's is a major player. John's gives us a prophetic picture built into his chapters of the final 21 years. It's so staggering to watch. It's incredible to see how it plays out and where these events are. And guess what? What did we just see in John? The last place Judas is mentioned is in chapter 18. Judas being mentioned in chapter 18 of John is the 10.5 years, or in the 11th year of tribulation, which is mid-trumpets Coincidentally, right where all of these things we talk about begin to take place, right when Messiah is cut off, when the pit is opened. Interesting how that works. How many times, guys, how many times do we have to go through all of these hundreds of different revelations? And whenever something new comes in, as we even discussed in the last one, what we discussed in the one before that, with the high priest Caiaphas showing up here and the high priest Caiaphas showing up here, it's incredible to see where these things show up. And of course, to see the last place Judas is mentioned is John 18. It's perfectly fitting yet again. So let's go have a look into this. In Luke chapter 22, we see, so we're going to go into the Synoptic Gospels here with Luke, Mark, and Matthew and show you something that many of you guys have seen and understood before. In Luke chapter 22, we see that Judas is here. Satan enters Judas, and it says in 22 verse 5, and they were glad and covenanted, okay, to give him money. So we have the high priests and captains, right, that Judas is about to betray Jesus, and they were glad and covenanted to give him money. Money. That's all that it is, money. We don't know what the amount is here. When we go to Mark's gospel, we see something similar. In chapter 14, verse 10, and Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests to betray him unto them. And when they had heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. So now back to back in Luke and in Mark, he's promised money, but no amount being given. When we come to Matthew's gospel in chapter 26, we see starting in verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priest and said unto them, what will you give me? And I will deliver him unto you. And they covenanted with him 30 pieces of silver. Now we get a dollar amount. We get the figure that he was being given to betray him. There's a reason when we see these things. We must understand there's prophecy riddled throughout the scriptures. This one is so blatantly obvious. Watch what happens. You'll be able to see this confusion that so many people have had in relation to Judas. Because how do you explain these two differences? Well, you can't without prophecy. Just like you can't explain many of the other ones that I'm going to touch on to make a point similar to what I did in the previous video. I'm going to show you some other ones that prove that many of these events within the Gospels, when you're reading the Synoptic Gospels and you're seeing these differences, and there's different wording, there's different time frames, you will see, once you understand these differences and you begin to understand the differences in the Gospels, that it is all prophetic. So when the world of church, of those that study prophecy over the centuries, have told us that a third of the book is prophecy, of the Bible is prophecy, it's more like 50 to 100. We'll say maybe 50, maybe 75%. Because these things that we revealed here over the last 6.5 years have never been understood before. When you see them, you'll realize that the Gospels are full, as well as many other books. So look at what we see for the 30 pieces of silver. There's Matthew's 30 pieces of silver that were covenanted. You'll see it again in Matthew 27 twice. We'll talk about it later. Where's the only other places we read about 30 pieces of silver? That's right, Zechariah. So we saw it in Matthew chapter 26. We see it also in Matthew 27. Listen to what it says in Matthew chapter 27 and verse 2. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he had saw that he was condemned, repented himself. Interesting, right? Repented himself. and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to that. Not my problem. You did it. That's your bloody money. We don't want it. And he cast the 30 pieces of silver into the temple. And he cast the pieces of silver into the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. And the chief priests took the pieces of silver and said, It is not lawful for to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. Okay? Watch this. When we go into Zechariah, let me go into our trusted eSword. I love eSword, as you guys know. We have all of our word definitions in it. When we come to Zechariah chapter 11, we've taught that this vintage of old that's come down, this is Satan when he's being cast down. We've taught on the 3 shepherds, right, being cut off. That's the false prophet, Satan, and the Antichrist. All right, the beast. And what does Jesus have to do? He has to break his covenant that he made with all people from the end of seals to the middle of trumpets. He had made this covenant. What happens when you make a covenant? We just read what happens when a covenant is made. He made a covenant. Now he has to break it because Satan's been cast down. The pit is going to be opened, and he ends up breaking that covenant in one day. Well, remember what happens when a covenant is made. The only way to fulfill that covenant is for the shedding of blood. So now what happens? Look at the story that follows it. Zechariah 11, starting in verse 12. And I said unto them, If you think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. So people read this and they say, well, wait a second. Why does it tell us that it was fulfilled in Jeremiah? The 30 pieces of silver are in Zechariah. Yet Scripture says this was fulfilled by the words of Jeremiah. How is it possible? When one is 30 pieces of silver in Matthew, the other one is 30 pieces of silver in Zechariah, yet the one in Jeremiah, which we'll cover in a bit, isn't. What do we not understand? How about the wording? How about the wording? Okay? So it says, Wait for my price, 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said unto me, Cast it into the potter. Cast it unto the potter a goodly price, that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them in the house, to the porter of the house of the Lord. Sounds familiar? Does this sound like the story that was taking place over in Matthew chapter 27? Certainly does, doesn't it? We see the price being the exact same, and him casting it into the what? To cast it into the house, and it's talking about hanging himself. Now let's keep going. Let me show you an example, as I was saying earlier. I'll show an example here of how other things we know have been fulfilled in part. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 9, one of our famous ones we've discovered here in the past year and a bit. We see in Isaiah 9 verse 1 that there's a vexation that's called a light affliction that happens at the beginning. It happens in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. And afterward, a more grievous affliction is coming. Okay? But then it says, in Isaiah, continuing in Isaiah 9 verse 2, the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them the light has shined. We know it relates to Jesus coming through. We've broken all that down. But then it talks about verse 12, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind, they shall devour Israel with an open mouth. Wait a second. If we go to where this was fulfilled, which we were told it was fulfilled in Matthew chapter 4, and we read it, we showed this incredible revelation of how it applies to prophecy in the end of days, how it's, how we've talked about a number of times now about how Jesus had heard that John was cast into prison. So we know that it wasn't directly at Jesus's birthday, but that it was about 2 months later. We've talked about that before. We're not going to go down that trail tonight. And it says in verse 13 in Matthew 4, and leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, by the sea and beyond Jordan, Galilee, of the Gentiles, the people which sat in darkness saw a great light, and to them which sat in the region of the shadow of death, light is sprung up. Oh, wait a second. Where's the rest of the story? Was when we go to Isaiah chapter 9, had Zebulun and Naphtali just been attacked before Christ showed up? Nope. What about after Jesus showed up, had walked through there? Did the more grievous affliction come by the Syrians and the Philistines that devoured all of Israel? Nope. Yet Matthew said he fulfilled this by being the light coming into the darkness by walking through these two places. You see how the story isn't complete? There's an is to come prophetic revelation in it, which we've discovered and we've revealed and broken down. And we believe prayerfully we've understood that it's this year. And we know that it starts with an attack on northern Israel and Haifa and Tel Aviv. The Son of Man comes on the 8th day after that attack and is here for 40 days as the Son of Man. And when he's gone, after 50 days, at the day and hour no one knows, Feast of Trumpets, Syria is coming with those with them to destroy them. That's not what happened in Jesus' time. Nor were they just recently attacked when Jesus as the light came walking through. So you see what I'm saying? Just in that alone, you're seeing this understanding that there's still more of the picture that still has to be completed. It actually was only like an in part being fulfilled because Jesus, who is the light, came walking through those places. But the reality is that there's much more to it that's still to be fulfilled that hasn't yet been completed. Here's another one. A lot of people say, see, this was Jesus in Zechariah chapter 13, the shepherd who they struck, and then they're going to recognize. Clearly, this isn't the struck Jesus that was already struck when he came the first time. Because listen to the wording. In Zechariah 13:7, awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is his fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. The shepherd and the man that is his fellow. Can you say Zerubbabel because they're the two witnesses? Hello? Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn my hand upon the little ones. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd part shall be left therein. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. And they shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. You see this happen yet? Nope. This is the end of days. It's the shepherd with his fellow that's going to be struck. But the church will try to tell us, Well, if this is Jesus being struck, this has to be the strike that Jesus took when he was here the first time. No. We know that it's not. We know that Jesus was struck twice in Numbers chapter 20, one responsible by Moses, one responsible by Aaron. He fulfilled the Moses one, he has to fulfill the priestly one. Why does he have to fulfill the priestly one? Because a priestly portion and priests along the way who belong to the Father have to be saved. There has to be a portion for them. And this hasn't happened. So even though your churches are probably trying to tell you this if they ever read into Zechariah 13, because they have no understanding that Christ is going to be struck again. Even if some of them thought it, they wouldn't be telling it from the pulpit, I could tell you that. So we've understood this. And it just so happens it's Zechariah chapter 13. What did we say happens? Zechariah chapter 13 is the end of the 13 years of tribulation where Messiah is killed again, just like that one said in Zechariah 13. The shepherd and his fellow, who is Zerubbabel, because they're the two witnesses. When does it happen? It happens at the end of the sixth trumpet, right? Revelation chapter 11. Well, we saw that the 30 pieces of silver in Zechariah chapter 11 are, guess what? The same chapter to year verse that equals the same as the final year or the final time in John 18 when Judas is in the picture. And the story in Matthew, not found in Luke and in Mark, because this is Luke's portion, there's Mark's portion, here's Matthew's portion, which is the 7 years of trumpets. It just so happens it was only in Matthew where we see the 30 pieces of silver. And in Zechariah chapter 11, which is the same chapter to year count as John. Pretty interesting how that continues to work, right? So what am I showing you in this? These things that we've been told have already happened. Because prophecy by the world hasn't been properly understood. Is it there? And again, this is not me bashing. It's not me saying, oh, they're a bunch of fools. I know that it just wasn't yet the time. They haven't understood it. We know there's a group of people here being prepared. That's why we're understanding it. And the Lord will complete it when he comes for that worker group that he chooses to remain as the pre-trib is taken to go to the third heaven. Where's another one? How about this one? In Luke chapter 4. In Luke chapter 4, again, another thing we've spoken on about many times, Luke in order, right? Luke 1, 2, 3, 4. We see the Jesus in Luke chapter 4, starting in verse 18. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted and to preach deliverance unto the captives and recovering the sight of the blind and to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And he closed the book. And he closed the book and said it was fulfilled in their ears. We know what he was declaring. We know that he was declaring a jubilee. We've shared this. We know that from that incredible revelation, Jesus was declaring the jubilee, which would have been about 29 AD. And we've discussed it, we've broken it down, and when we follow the jubilee count, we get to the last jubilee, which was 89-90, and we start what? A 7-year cycle again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sabbaths. When the 7th Sabbath is over, the 49th year, it's the jubilee. So when Jesus is declaring that in chapter 9 and chapter 4 of Luke, and we know the time frame of the year that he declares it, All we do is just continue a Jubilee count from that time, and it revealed to us right here, which means 2024 would start the 14 years after the 50 days that are the portion called above of Luke's discourse and the pre-trib and everything else. But what else did Jesus do? What else was being said there? Well, it said to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, and he closed the book. Was that the end of the story? No. Many people wonder why he did it, because he was fulfilling Isaiah 61 when he said it. But was he really fulfilling all of Isaiah 61? No. Because he never finished the rest of the verse, which was, and the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all that mourn. Why didn't he finish it? Because it wasn't the rest of the story. Because the vengeance of the Lord comes right here in that final year. So he never finished the rest of the verse, because it wasn't yet the time of the vengeance of the Lord God. When does the vengeance come? The treading of the grapes in the final year of tribulation, the 14th year of tribulation, the 7th year of trumpets. This is why we say it's over after the 13 years of tribulation. Why is it over? Because at this point, at the start of the 14th year, the Lord is returning as lightning from one end of heaven to the other, and the whole world will see him, as Matthew 24, immediately after the tribulation of those days, they're going to see him coming on the clouds. So again, we can understand why certain words are being said and others aren't. We can understand why some stories we've been told all of our lives, and centuries of people have been told it, because they didn't yet have the revelation of the differences in the Gospels to be able to understand that they was speaking to certain groups and different portions of people prophetically for the end of days. Watch this one. How about Nineveh, right? This is one that I was going to share, that I was mentioning kind of in part at the beginning. It's the same type of thing with the story of Jonah. It is one of those stories that everybody that has spent time studying the scriptures understands there is a clear difference between Luke, Mark, and Matthew. In Luke, he says he will be as Jonah was 40 days unto Nineveh. What do we know about the Son of Man compared to Luke? He's coming for 40 days after the pre-trib Gentile, dressed all in a gorgeous white radiant robe. After that wedding is done, he's coming for 40 days to warn as Jonah did. In Mark, he says, no sign will be given unto you like Jonah the prophet, right? They're looking like Jonah the prophet. No sign will be given. And he got in the ship and he left. And then you go to Matthew's, and Matthew says, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Well, guess what? We know Christ wasn't 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Right? We'll talk on that in a bit. But we know that didn't happen yet. But we're taught in Scripture, because everybody is taught from the Gospel of Matthew, that that's what happened. Even though in 14 or 15 places in the Gospels, it says that he resurrected on the 3rd day. Well, you have to understand the count to say he resurrected on the 3rd day. And when you understand it, it's not 3 days and 3 nights. To be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights means 72 hours, and resurrecting sometime on the 4th day. That's impossible. We know that this never was fulfilled yet. Just like the Jonah story in Mark. No warning, no sign is going to be given to them. We revealed what that means prophetically. They're going to see the Lord coming, or the Lord's coming on heavenly Mount Zion at the end of the 6th seal. Everybody's freaking out, saying, hide us. But They won't know when the great multitude rapture is going to happen. It's not going to happen right away. They don't have a sign as to when they're going. And then you go to Luke. The sign is what? There's going to be 40 days of the Son of Man before everything really fully breaks loose. It's prophecy. They haven't yet been fulfilled. That's the key to understand. The things that haven't been fulfilled will be fulfilled in as they say them. What I mean by that is if you go to Luke and it's 40 days as Jonah and he never yet fulfilled that, even though the church will try to tell you that was his resurrection for 40 days. No, it wasn't. We've been told that those 40 days were his days of Jonah. But it's not true because he didn't go around warning. He didn't do that. He didn't get resurrected and go around warning of the coming destruction they're about to be compassed about. It's still to be fulfilled, which means these things of the story of Jonah in the three Gospels are still yet to be fulfilled in the way they're being shared. We know other places, which we'll talk about in a little later on, where if something was already fulfilled, like we see in Luke chapter 9, Mark chapter 9, and in Matthew chapter 17, we see the story, for example, like this one. In Luke's, it says about in 8 days. In Mark, it says after 6 days. And in Matthew, it says after 6 days. We know that prophetically, events that have been fulfilled as days, in the end of days, they're being fulfilled as years. We'll talk about that a little bit later and show that I didn't make this up. This was something that is already well known in prophetic understanding. So we're seeing all of these differences. We can understand that some of these things haven't been fulfilled completely or haven't yet been fulfilled at all. But because we've been told, because everybody's focus is from Matthew, we believe that it's all been fulfilled based on 98% of the things said from Matthew, while only trying to fill in the blanks with a little bit of Mark and Luke. And that's what's caused us to miss these differences. Just like we just showed. We can clearly go to those things and show that they haven't happened yet. Either not fully or not yet at all. And we see this so much when it comes to Matthew's gospel. So much. You see, just like this one here. How about this? We know that Matthew's after 6 days in the Mount of Transfiguration is the relation to the after 6 years of the trumpet judgments. Mark's was the end of 6 years of seals, because the Lord's coming at the end of the 6th to start the 7th seal. Then you have the 7 years of trumpets, of which there's 6 years as days, as years, and then he's returning feet down on the Mount of Olives. So the transfiguration in Matthew after 6 days is a prophetic typology of the Lord coming on the 14th year, okay, after the 6 years of trumpets. So in it, what do we read? Tell the vision till no man, till the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. You see, if it just said until the Son of Man be risen again, that's one thing. We see that a lot in the Gospels. But when it says again from the dead, now you're speaking a whole different story. Look at where this shows up in the Gospels. Matthew 17, John chapter 20, Acts 17 as a reference, Romans 10 as another reference, and Hebrews 13. So, watch this. Where's Matthew's portion? Trumpets. Watch this. What about John chapter 20? The final year as a picture of the end of the 20th year, which is the end of the 13th year. Just like the end of the 6th trumpet, the death of the 2 witnesses, and then they resurrect. Chapter 20, the equivalent in the chapters to years, as the end of the 13th year. Where was the other place? Check this out. Hebrews 13. Now the God of peace that brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ. Watch this. Hebrews chapter 13. Look at this. Hebrews chapter 13 is another one. The 13 chapters give us typologies within, and look at this. Chapter 13 is the same as chapter 20 to John's chapters to years. Every place is directly referencing Christ that's about to do something again. And look at what it says only in John's gospel. You realize why John's gospel stands alone, right? Right? It's called the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. And we reveal who the Synoptic Gospels are speaking to, and John stands alone. Interesting how John stands alone, and he's got 21 chapters, and Jesus' death and resurrection is chapter 20, which is a picture of the end of the 20th year in the big picture. And when you go to Matthew, Mark, and Luke's gospel, the resurrection story isn't in the second last chapter, it's in the last chapter of every one. Why would that happen only in John's? Prophecy. Prophecy. How is it possible? These things keep lining up and telling us the same picture time frame. Because there's understanding to it. But we have to understand, why is Christ going to do it again? And we have understood why he's going to do it again. But can we understand scripturally why with a specific person? Well, let's keep looking and see what we find out. So this one is right here. This is Answers in Genesis. So this guy, this ministry has a really good YouTube channel as well, right? So listen to what their explanation is. Of course, it's one of those things where they just try to explain away and giving something that really just doesn't jive. It doesn't really make much sense. Listen to what it says. So, did Judas Iscariot die by hanging, as Matthew 27:5, or did he die by falling and bursting open, as Acts chapter 1? Listen to this explanation. Some people have wrongly assumed that Matthew and Luke are contradictory in their account to Judas's death, since the Bible is inerrant, and Judas cannot have died by hanging and died by falling and bursting open. Rather, they are two different viewpoints. Do you know how many times we hear this in church? They're just perspective. It depends on the perspective. It depends on the point of view. And then you bring up, well, what about the story of Jonah? And they're like, well, they can't explain it. Or you try to bring up the different colors that Jesus was arrayed in. Try to bring up those colors to pastors. Most of them don't even realize that there was a purple and gorgeous, because they all read from Matthew. They'll all mostly likely tell you scarlet. And when then they see the difference, they'll say, well, it was viewpoints or perspective. Why? Was the sun shining differently from Matthew, Luke, and Mark and those that were there? Not that they were all there, but the reference of the ones that were there that they were writing from. And you see, this is why these differences and the revelation of the differences in the Gospels, there's a powerful reason why it was the first thing that was revealed here in this ministry. Because it's the foundation of the understanding of everything that follows. It reveals the confusion in the Word that has been sealed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. There is no way of explaining many of these things away. Viewpoints won't do it. Perspectives won't do it. And this is another one where they're trying to give a viewpoint to make an example of. So it says, for example, if I saw a car hit a pedestrian, I might simply say that the pedestrian died because he was hit by the car. The coroner, who came on the scene later but did not actually see the accident, might give a graphic description of the injuries of the pedestrian. Both the coroner and I are describing the same event, just as different aspects. No, this is not a good example. because this person that got hit by a car got hit by a car. This being spoken about is the difference between somebody being hung and hanging there and somebody else who went over a cliff and splattered on the ground below. It's not the same event. You can't use something like perspective or viewpoints to explain it away. It doesn't matter that Luke was a doctor and he's just trying to give more graphic detail. Because when somebody hangs, their guts don't splatter open. Hello. It's not even close to being able to use as a scenario of two people seeing the same car accident or referencing the same car accident. It doesn't work. So then what's the answer? I'll tell you what the answer is. Watch this. It's like everything else we've been showing you. Words in Scripture that are prophetic that have not yet been fulfilled. Let's go to Acts chapter 1 and read the story of Judas. Okay? Judas, we see in 16, by the mouth of David spoken concerning Judas. Verse 18, Acts 1. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers of Jerusalem, insomuch as the field is called in their proper tongue, Alkadama, that is to say, the field of blood. Okay? The purchased field of blood. Not hanging, but where he gushed out as blood. Now let's go to where it's found and where the scriptures say that what was fulfilled in Judas was fulfilled in what we're told in the book of Jeremiah. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 32 and let's read what this wording tells us. Verse 7. And behold, Hanamel the son of Shallum, thine uncle, shall come unto thee, saying, Buy thee my field at that is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption it is thine to buy. Hanamel thy uncle's son, in the court of the prison, according to the word of the Lord, he said unto me, Buy my field, I pray thee, that is in Anathoth, which is in the country of Benjamin, for the right of inheritance it is thine, and the redemption is thine. Buy of it for thyself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. And I bought the field of Hanamel, my uncle's son, that was in Anathoth, and weighed him the money, even 17 shekels of silver. You see the story going on here? Does this story sound like the story that we read in Zechariah chapter 11? What does Zechariah 11 tell us again? 30 pieces of silver. The 30 pieces of silver were cast into the potter's house. Cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Okay? When we went to Matthew chapter 26, or is it 27? I think 26. We see the 30 pieces of silver. 27. We see in 27. In 26, we see that he hanged himself, right? Cast them into the potter. The pieces of silver was the price of blood of the potter's field. Casting in the pieces of silver. We're seeing the conversation in Matthew is the conversation connected to the one in Zechariah chapter 11. See, what you have to understand is there's no way the church could have ever tracked and understood this. It's impossible like all of the rest of the differences in the Gospels. Because everything they've learned is from Matthew. Everything they've been taught in seminary school. All of them have a foundation unknowingly to them that is all based in Matthew, so that when they read the rest of Scripture, no matter where it is, their foundation comes from the foundation of everything that comes out of Matthew. And so they can't understand why these differences are there. And they try to associate them in all sorts of different ways. But when you see this and you realize that it said, hey, what he did was fulfilled in Jeremiah, yet Zechariah is the one that says 30 pieces of silver. Zechariah is the one that said cast into the to the potter in the house of the Lord. How is it that this is then fulfilled by Judas in Acts 1 gushing with blood? Doesn't make any sense. Of course, it can't be the one connected to Zechariah, because it's connected to the one to Jeremiah. The one connected to Zechariah is the one from Matthew 26 into 27 in relation to the 30 pieces of silver. It's impossible to understand without end of days prophetic revelation. Let me show you another example of something that there were events obviously that happened, but because we have, you see, if we didn't have different gospels and we just had one, boy, life would be so much easier, wouldn't it? It'd just be bang, here's what happened. Here's the discourse, there's the end of days. Line it all up with Revelation, and it would be done. Why on earth do we have three gospels called the Synoptic Gospels and John who stands on his own? Why do we have people that argue pre, mid, or post being true when we have Luke, Mark, and Matthew while John stands on his own? Father, Son, Spirit. And everybody can go to scriptures for these things. And everybody could see the differences within these gospels and these same stories. Yet over and over and over again, it's just continued with the confusion and just brushing it off. And all we want to do is try to reach more people. All that I ever want to do is just share it. I just want to have more conversations with more people that are willing to sit down and have a conversation and listen to the going back and forth in all of it and then discuss it. That's what we want. We know it's not going to reach many. It's His will, and we'll just keep doing what we have to do because we've understood now that it's a people being prepared. But when you see it, how can anybody argue? The only way people can argue is if they haven't taken the time to see it. That's what's going on. Watch this. Let me give you another example of a difference in relation to the Gospels. And we'll don't worry, we'll get back to Matthew and to Judas. Here's the one of Mark's transfiguration after 6 days, which is the prophetic picture of the end of the 6 years of seals and the Lord coming on heavenly Mount Zion, just as you read at the end of the 6th seal in Revelation chapter 6. We see in verse 3, it says, and his garment became shining, exceeding white. Again, we've covered these two differences in white, and it's powerful, right? This one here only used twice, and the only other place it's used is by the white in Revelation chapter 7 of a portion of those who are part of the great multitude rapture. Pretty crazy, right? So, and fitting, because this is at the Lord coming in the 7th year of seals to seal the 144, and then the great multitude rapture happens. Funny how that works. But then listen to what it says. Exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on the earth can white them. This word fuller in all of the New Testament, it's used once. Once. Do you ever ask yourself, what's the point? The only other thing, the only way you could ask yourself why this is here is if you've read the Gospels attentively to their differences. You've read one transfiguration to the other, especially in relation to the Synoptic Gospels. Because that's the only way you're going to get to understand why there's these clear differences. So, why on earth would there be fuller, which is only used one time in the Gospels? Yet, watch what happens. Where is it? Let me go to Jeremiah. Let me go to Jeremiah 32. Now did I lose my point with it? Give me a second. I was making a point with the fuller. Okay, yeah, I'll get to it. So what we see in relation to, let's go back into Mark chapter 9. I knew I was going to do that when I was preparing my tabs and where I had moved this other piece. I knew I was going to catch myself because I didn't want it right beside the next thing. So, but remember this fuller. I'm going to show you this fuller. Something used only once, and it's only in Mark's discourse. Now, there has to be a reason for it. These words are put there on purpose with a reason. And I want you to understand this, because listen to what happens as we go further down in Mark's transfiguration story. This prophetic picture of the differences. Remember what Matthew said? That the Son of Man were risen again from no, hey, there's no word again here. Why isn't there a word again? You see, only Matthew had the word again. Not Mark, not Luke. Matthew has just risen from the dead, which is what he fulfilled. So we're seeing that this again one isn't there because this is relating to end of seals. It's not this portion of time when he's going to do it again. But now listen to what happens. And I want you to remember, keep this in mind, that we also have this story of the fuller going on, used only once right there. We go to Mark 9, verse 11. And they asked him, saying, why say the scribes that Elias or Elijah must come first? And he answered and told them, Elijah verily cometh first, and restoreth all things. And how it is written of the Son of Man, that he must suffer many things and be set at naught. But I say unto you, that Elijah is indeed come, and they have done unto him whatsoever they wanted. When we read the story in Matthew, it's similar, but that, yeah, he had already come as well. And we find out that it was John. But in Mark's, we see that verily he does come first and restores all things. But I say unto you, Elijah is indeed come. Well, listen to what it says. In verse 12, it said, Elijah verily cometh first and restoreth, meaning he's going to do these things. But I say unto you that Elijah is indeed come. And we find out from Matthew that it's because he was John the Baptist. Now, it's pretty strange, isn't it? Because then they all go in Matthew, okay, I hear you. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Well, Elijah never died. He went up in a whirlwind. John the Baptist was beheaded. Wait a second. How was John the Baptist Elijah? We're told that Elijah is going to come and restore all things. We were told John would restore all things. So we have that typology connection where Jesus is saying in Matthew that he was John the Baptist. But this is also giving you a prophetic is to come. Because it says, verily, Elijah verily cometh first and restoreth all things. Well, wait a second. If he was John the Baptist and verily did restore all things, why did we have Jesus in Luke chapter 12? Let's go to Luke chapter 12. Remember, by this point in Luke chapter 12, John the Baptist is dead, right? John the Baptist has been beheaded. And Jesus has told them that John the Baptist was Elijah who restoreth all things. Now listen to what Jesus says in 12:49, Luke 12:49, and further. I am come to send fire on the earth. Did Jesus send fire on the earth when he was here? No. Can you say spiritually and did these things? Yes. But in actually sending fire? No. In the end of days, is he going to send fire? Yes. Do you think then that this was fulfilled? Because listen to what it says. I am come to send fire on the earth, and what will I if it be already kindled? But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how I am straitened until it be accomplished. Suppose you that I am come to give peace on the earth, I tell you nay, but rather division. That's a head scratcher, isn't it? What do you mean you're coming to bring division? When you said John just came and restored all things? So thank you, John, for coming and restoring all things. But now I'm going to divide everybody that you supposedly restored. Or do you think there's a prophetic implication still to come? Because look at what he says next. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one house divided against 3. 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. The father shall be divided against the son against the father, the mother against the daughter, and the daughter against the mother, and the mother-in-law against the daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. Do you think maybe he's speaking prophetic? And if he's speaking prophetic by when he's coming to send fire, and he's coming to bring division, not peace on the earth, and he's going to divide families, do you think maybe there's a greater prophetic revelation here when we go to Mark's discourse, and Mark's discourse is the time of seals? Do you know Mark's discourse says that Matthew's discourse doesn't say? Mark 13:12. Now the brother shall betray the brother to the death, and the father the son, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. Hello. It starts in Luke's. It's here in Mark's. And when you get to Matthew's, there is no father against son, mother against daughter. Remember what it says? You'll have many offended and shall betray one another. No mention of father against son, mother against daughter. Why is that? Because in Mark's transfiguration story, which is the time of the end of the 6 days or the 6 years of seals, Elijah, who is as a John the Baptist, is coming during the time of seals. There is going to be the Elijah worker group here, just as it says, who's going to restore all things. So yes, the John the Baptist did come. He was the Elijah, but there's still an Elijah to come. How can we show this? All we got to do is go to Malachi chapter 3. Malachi 3 verse 1. Behold, I send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom you delight in, behold, he shall come. Get ready. But who may abide in the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like, are you ready for this? A refiner's fire. Remember what he said he's coming? Fire. He's what? As a refiner's fire. Here it is. And like a fuller's soap. And like a fuller's soap. So he's coming at a time when his messenger, who will have prepared the way, has come and prepared the way. And when he comes as the refiner, which is when he's coming at the end of the 6th year of seals, he's coming as a representation of white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can whiten them. When was this word used only once? Where was the first time, going from Luke, Mark, Matthew, that Elijah shows up and he says, yeah, he is coming and he is going to restore all things, but also that he was already here indeed, already as John was? This is prophecy. The prophecy that's connected to the time of the fuller soap, which is related to the prophetic days as years. This is what we were saying here, the story of Jonah in Mark 9:1. Just like Mark's Jonah story, they won't know when they're going, because it says in 9:1, verily I say unto you, that there be some of them that stand here which shall not taste of death till they have seen, past tense, the kingdom of God come with power. When are they going to see the kingdom of God come with power? Right here. At the end of the 6 years of seals. They're going to see him coming and the whole world's freaking out. But they're not going to know. They will have seen it come. But they're not giving a warning of a sign of Jonah. Nothing for them. And that when he comes, it's connected to the fuller soap and Elijah, who was here to restore all things as a John the Baptist. Now when we go back into Malachi, let's see what Malachi chapter 4 has to say about it. Starting in verse 2. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And you shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall, and you shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts. Verse 5 and 6. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Hello. Was there really an Elijah that already came? John was a type of Elijah, but John was not the final Elijah that Jesus was talking about in Mark and Matthew's transfiguration stories. The Elijah that's coming is the one that's coming before the great and dreadful day of the Lord at the end of seals. We saw that in Mark's discourse is when they're going to be father against son, mother against daughter, and so forth, that Jesus brings the division of when he comes for the 40 days after the Gentile wedding. So it's the Elijah, the remnant workers. Some are like John Moses's, some are like John Elijah's. And the Elijah ones here we could see is the prophetic picture of this worker group during seals who are being chosen to work from among the pre-trib bride group. They're being chosen before the pre-trib is taken, as we've revealed. They're going to remain and they're going to work. A portion of them is a John Moses type, and another portion is a John Elijah type. This Elijah isn't the John that already came. It's not possible. Because John the Baptist was there when Jesus came, and Jesus didn't come in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And then you see in verse 6, it says, and he shall return the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. What's he going to do? He's going to restore father and son, mother and daughter, and so forth, and he's going to do it before the coming great and dreadful day of the Lord. Which means what in Mark? Which means what's being told to us here in Mark in relation to Elijah isn't only in part happened with John when he was here the first time, but that there is a prophetic one that still hasn't happened. But we've all been told, no, he fulfilled it as Elijah already. Why do you think now when we go to Matthew's transfiguration story, and he gives a longer spiel of what had already happened, he is no longer restoring them and so forth, but that he's already done these things and they didn't even recognize him? It's all prophecy. Which means the stories of the transfigurations and their differences are clearly showing you a prophetic difference in them. And you could understand why in Luke chapter 12, when he first says, be girded about when I return from the wedding, he's clearly talking about the prophetic future Gentile wedding when he comes back to fulfill the 40 days as Jonah. And then he's having this conversation with them. First watch, second watch, third watch. The first watch is that group that he first told to be ready when he comes back from the wedding. And then he starts to describe these things that will happen because he's going to bring division on the earth. It's all prophecy. It's so crazy. You know, I've said it before. When you understand these things with end time eyes, it sometimes gets very difficult to see the things that we've been told already happened in the was or in the is. From creation to Christ is was, from Christ to the moment of the pre-trib is the is, and from the moment of the pre-trib to the end is the is to come. So the is of what happened is sometimes very hard to track and remember and try to follow what the church tries to tell us it was. Because so much of what they've tried to tell us was actually prophetic future still not fulfilled. And this is just another great example of it, which directly relates to us back to what we're talking about in relation to Judas. How could Judas have two forms of death? How does that make any sense? Unless you have him thrown out a rope on the end of a tree, hanging over a cliff. He hangs himself, he dies by that, then it breaks and he falls and he kills himself by splattering. Unless the Mark Luke one, which are things more likely fulfilled in the is, and you see that there was a money, but it doesn't tell you how much. And then you go to the story of Jeremiah. And you could see that the story of Jeremiah is connected to the story of Acts chapter 1. That it was fulfilled, that he did splatter. Which means there's still the story of the hanging. And it just so happens that the story of the hanging and where it's talked about in Matthew is precisely where the exact money of 30 pieces of silver is connected to Zechariah, which is prophecy. Hello. It's crazy how powerful this stuff gets. So let's go to John chapter 17. So watch where we are here in John chapter 17. Okay? In John chapter 17, now here we are in the Matthew portion. Okay? In the third year of trumpets. That's the prophetic picture. And we're going to read some of these things here about what we were talking about earlier, about what the Father gave the Son. In John 17, starting in verse 9, I pray for them. I pray not for the world. Wow, crazy, right? I thought Jesus prayed for all the world. So what's he talking about here? Well, in the he was talking about the disciples and the apostles and so forth. So let's see what it says. I pray for them, I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine. Remember we were talking about this at the beginning? The Father has given him a group of workers. We see this in Revelation chapter 14 related to the 144,000 who we know are the ones who are sealed at the end of 6 years of seals. They're sealed in Revelation chapter 7 when the Lord has come on heavenly Mount Zion in the clouds like Mark's discourse. And we see here they are on Mount Zion with the Lamb. The 144,000 having whose name on them? The Son's name? No, the Father's name. Because they belong to the Father. And we know that the tribes and the Levites, we know it, I think, in Leviticus and in Numbers, that the Levites in the priestly line, they belong to the Father. They were taken from among the tribes, and they belong to the Father. Funny, right? A group taken from among the tribes, which is exactly what takes place in the great multitude rapture. It relates to the tribes. Remember this even in 2nd Esdras? We see this in 2nd Esdras, which we've covered many times. We see the pre-trib happen in verse 29. Then it says, then they're going to make war against each other, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, because it's the red horse rider. Then the things that I showed you before will take place, which are the things of seals. Then will my Son be revealed, and they're going to stop their fighting, and they're going to come to try to fight him. And what does it say? And he shall stand on Mount Zion. And Zion will be come to be made manifest to all people, prepared and built, just like the wording in Mark. And then it says, as you saw a mountain carved without hand. And what happens? Well, we know the 144,000 are sealed, right? At the end of the 6th year of seals, the 144,000 are sealed after he's destroyed them in the end of the 6th seal, the 6th year of seals. Then what happens? What does he symbolize? Look at what it says, which is symbolized by the flames. Isn't that what he said in Mark? Isn't that what he said even in Luke chapter 12? In the prophetic understanding, when you realize that he's coming to set it on fire, he's coming to bring fire, he's coming to bring division, and he brings division, and then there he is in the symbolism of the fire, right? At the end of seals. And then it says, and as for you seeing him gather to himself another multitude that was peaceable, these are the 10 tribes. Who are the 10 tribes? The ones that are called the lost tribes, right? Which is the world, because they've all mingled and mixed in with the world. And the Gentiles, that's why the Gentiles are grafted in. And then who comes in after these guys come in? Well, we know Judah will recognize their Messiah now, because the age of the Gentiles that has come in is now over. The Jews will recognize their conquering Messiah who defeated their enemies and had scattered them, and is going to declare the rebuilding of the temple. They know that as their Messiah. And so what do we have in Revelation chapter 7? You have all 12 tribes being represented, and they were taken from what? They were taken from among the people of the earth, from among the 10 and the 2 tribes, and you end up with your 144,000, just like Numbers says, that were taken from among the tribes to become the Levitical line through with the priests. And these guys have their father's name, the Father's name, written on them. Why? Because just like Numbers said, they belong to the Father. They're not getting any land. They don't get in the Jubilee, they don't have a portion of land. They're not getting their portion here and their portion there like Ezekiel 48 talks about, because theirs is the Father's. You get it? Theirs is the Father's. So when we're reading here in John chapter 17, then Jesus is talking about the ones that the Father gave him, for they are thine. And we know prophetically in the revelation of the is to come that we're in trumpets time, and trumpets time is what? Watch this. We know trumpets time, you see, in the big picture, like John's gospel, big picture, 17th year in the big picture, which would be in the 10th year of trumpets. And what started happening? Well, here they were on heavenly Mount Zion with the Lamb, and then they're going to go out during the first 3.5 years. And what do we know about this with the 7 churches? We revealed the 7 churches. There's the beginning of the 50 days. There's the 40 after the wedding. These guys are here during seals. There's the Antichrist showing up about mid-seals. There's the second half of seals, still dark ages. Here's the Lord coming. The reformation of the church. It's the end of seals. He's going to be now Israel's king. He's there on Mount Zion in paradise. And you have Philadelphia that goes out. When Philadelphia goes out, they're going during the first half of trumpets. And at the end of the first half of trumpets, we know they're given additional power. And look at what it says. The period of Israel's removal. Because at mid-trumpets, Messiah is cut off when the Laodicean age begins. So what we're looking at here in the 10th year, right here, the cutoff didn't happen yet. The betrayal hasn't happened yet, even by Judas. Like we talked about, the Zechariah 11 thing hasn't happened yet. Of the 30 pieces, the Judas, John 18, hasn't happened yet. These things still haven't happened. We're still right here. Okay? We're still right here. This is while the 144,000 are out doing their evangelist work. And in the midst of this 11th year is when the cutoff happens. So we're seeing wording like everything's still going fine, but the Lord himself knows that, of course, Judas is the one that's going to betray him. So he talks about it. But does Judas betray him in chapter 17? No. Let's keep going. Verse 10, John 17. And all mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world. Okay, Messiah is about to be cut off. But these are in the world, and I am come to thee, Holy Father. Keep through thine own name those whom thou hast given me, that they may be one as we are one. Verse 12. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Remember, prophetically, in the prophetic, this is during the first half of trumpets, sealed with the Father's name. They were with the Lord, followed him wheresoever he went. Remember that? You get the rest of the story. They were following him wheresoever he went, right? They which followed the Lamb wheresoever he goeth, redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. What did Jesus just finish saying? They're yours and they're mine. Thank you for them, for they are ours. So please keep them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me, I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition. I haven't lost any, Father, but one, the son of perdition. Right? So he does lose one, doesn't he? He goes on, verse 14, I have given them thy word, and the world hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. What happens when the evil comes, guys? The next chapter. The next chapter is when Satan's cast down. In the 11th year of tribulation, 10.5 years in, is precisely when evil is cast down, the pit is open, and the Antichrist beast comes back. Funny how that works, right? Let's go to John 18. Watch this. John 18. Now we get the betrayal of Judas. Verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kedron, where there was a garden. Interesting, right? Only in John's do you see now the garden show up. You don't see it in the other ones, but in John, where is he in chapter 18? Well, remember when he came at the end of seals, he was coming with heavenly Mount Zion. Where does the great multitude rapture go? They go to paradise. So he came with paradise. So here he is in the garden, into the which he entered, and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Remember? They're going to follow him wheresoever he goes. Judas then, having received the band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh hither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Verse 4. Jesus therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seeketh you? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. This is the end of Judas. We no longer see Judas in any of the Gospels, or specifically in John's Gospel again. Judas is no longer mentioned. How many times do we have to go through these things showing this prophetic picture in this timing? That we're in Matthew, we're in John 18, the last time where Judas shows up in the book that gives us the big picture, chapters to years, where he betrays Jesus, who was one of his priestly line workers, who was paid 30 pieces of silver, just as Zechariah 11 tells us, at the point when Messiah is going to be cut off because 3 of the wicked shepherds would now be on the scene. He's called the son of perdition. If we go to Revelation chapter 17, we know this timing of the son of perdition. Right? In Revelation 17:8, it says, the beast that thou sawest was, which of course is the second half of seals, is not, because he was killed at the end of seals by the Lord, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Okay? He's going to go into destruction and ruin. Okay? He's going to what? Like perish. Somebody is going to also die. You're going to see that the son of perdition that Judas is, he's not the beast. I think it gives us a prophetic, in a typology, it would appear as Judas could maybe be the beast, but he can't be. The reason for using son of perdition is the timing prophetically of the son of perdition. And you'll see what I mean. So what do we know about the son of perdition? Well, we know it's when the bottomless pit is open. Well, if we go to Revelation chapter 9, we know that the pit is opened at the first woe, which is the 5th angel. Here it is, the pit is opened. And when we go to Revelation chapter 12, we know that the pit is opened when Satan, who lost his battle in heaven against Michael and his angels, Satan and his angels are cast down. They know that they have but a short time, which we have taught many times is only 2.5 years of the final 3.5 years. So he gets what? He has 2.5 years to the end of the 13 before his time is over. Why? Because as we showed, 13 years it's over, and the Lord brings destruction against all the enemies in the 14th year. So what are we seeing in this short time? It's the first woe. It's the first woe. And we go to Revelation 11. We see that when this first woe happens, when Satan's been cast down, we see the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit makes war against the two witnesses. And he's going to kill them. But when he kills them, he doesn't kill them right away, because this war, as we've shared from Daniel chapter 12, we know is 2.5 of the final 3.5 years. Who is it? The one out of the bottomless pit, who is called the son of perdition. Just like when we go to 2 Thessalonians 2 that we covered not long ago, we see that it's the son of perdition at the falling away. So when we go to the 7 churches, what do we see happen? Bang. The time of Israel's removal. And when that happens, it's the time of apostasy. And in the time of apostasy, it's what? The falling away at the time of the son of perdition, who's going to exalt himself above all that's there. And we know now 3 of them are there again. The false prophet, the beast who's been brought back. Not the false prophet, the beast who has been brought back when the pit was opened. We have Satan who was cast down. And we have the false prophet. And in Zechariah 11, he told us the 3 shepherds who he abhors, who he just despises, and they hate him as well. Well, what do we know happens at the end of tribulation? At the end of the bowls? We see there were 3 of them. We see 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet in Revelation 16:13. They're your 3 that the Lord abhors, and they abhor him. Just so happens that's in Zechariah 11, when the vintage of old Satan is cast down, the pit is open, and there's those 3 being cut off. There's your breaking of the covenant. And it was the 30 pieces of silver cast into the house. It's not the same story as the one that's given from Acts 1 to Jeremiah 32. It's the one from Matthew being given to Zechariah 11. But the only way you're ever going to understand this is through this prophetic revelation. Because there are very, very, very few Christians, pastors and theologians and so forth, that have any understanding that Christ is going to die again. We know that he's going to die again. We've proven it. It's there in Scripture. This is what it's showing. If a pastor talks about this from the pulpit, that this is still something prophetic, he's going to have a riot on his hands. Because according to Matthew, these 30 pieces of silver were for the betrayal of Judas, which can only mean that another betrayal has to come in a Judas type. Well, you've seen all of these things that I showed that have partial fulfillment, that haven't been fulfilled, that have a typology of fulfillment in what happened in the is, but also are talking about what's going to happen in the is to come. If Elijah, who is the John type who already was here, yet we see in Malachi that the Elijah who's coming is the one coming during seals as John, because he's coming before the great and terrible day of the Lord, then why couldn't there also be another Judas type who is a typology of the Judas who already was, who ends up falling away. Of course there is. That's exactly the point of why I went into that stuff with with Elijah as well and John. If there's an Elijah John that already was, and John was the Elijah that already fulfilled that portion in the is, and yet there's scripture talking about Elijah who's coming in the is to come, who will restore all things, yet John was Elijah and there's still another Elijah, well then there's a third prophetic picture, because there was an Elijah in the was, there was an Elijah type in the is, and there's an Elijah type in the is to come. Just like Judas. There was a Judas, and Judas fulfilled his Judas part by splattering his guts and doing what he did. But there's another Judas, which is the Matthew Judas hanging. That's the one that will take place at the time of Zechariah chapter 11. This is what we're seeing. This is the last time Judas is mentioned. And why does that become important to us? Because Judas in John chapter 18, as we shown, is Zechariah chapter 11, which is the time of trumpet judgments of Matthew and their 7 years, and it's also the mid-trumpets, Satan being cast down. It's the mid-trumpets when the pit is opened and the son of perdition comes out of the pit, who is the beast who was cast in the battle when the Lord killed him at the end of seals, at the end of the 6th year of seals. Now the pit is opened. We see it. It's connected to the pit. It's connected to the beast of Antichrist by him being called the son of perdition. But as I said, is he actually the beast Antichrist who is the actual son of perdition? No, he can't be. And you know why he can't be? Watch this. In Revelation chapter 16, which I had just shown you, we know that at the end of the bowls, we see the spirits like frogs come out of all three of them. We've taught on this. We know that in the bowl judgments, they have to be before the end of the 14 years. They have to be in that final 14th year of tribulation, because all three of them are here. Why does that matter? Because in Revelation chapter 19, when the treading of the grapes, the final battle that takes place in the 14th year, in the winepress of the treading of the grapes of the wrath of Almighty God, we see in verse 19 and 20, it says, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that brought miracles before him." That's how you know the beast out of the earth in Revelation 13 is the false prophet that brought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. Listen to this. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. This is how you know, first of all, that the bowls happen before the end of this battle. Okay, so somewhere towards the end of the 14th year of tribulation. But what else do we know? We know that the beast, when he comes out of the pit, he's also called the son of perdition. But the son of perdition, who is the beast, is being cast into the lake of fire. There is no saving the beast or false prophet who are in the lake of fire. And then what happens? We know that Satan is then bound and he's chained in the bottomless pit, not in the lake of fire, but in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan is loosed. There's a final battle of which the Lord will just destroy them instantly. And in Revelation 20, verse 10, it says, "And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever." You see, this beast ain't coming back. Okay? The beast, false prophet are the first two cast into the lake of fire, and the rest of the unbelieving, unwilling to accept Christ during all of it and all their lives and all of tribulation will then join them at the judgment, which happens at the end of the millennial reign. They'll all join where the devil and beast and false prophet are. The first two thrown in there, though, are the beast and the false prophet. So if the beast is thrown in there and he's the son of perdition, well, there's no way that he's going to get rescued. And this is why I was telling you, in relation to the son of perdition, when we see this in John chapter 17, that is the revelation of who Judas is as a type of the son of perdition. It was all about timing. It's the betrayal of Judas that gives Jesus up to be killed. Okay? But it's not that Judas is the beast. We're given a picture for prophetic timing, for the understanding of the timing in prophecy. The last place and where he deceives them is here. Here it is in Zechariah 11, where where it's spoken about for the 30 pieces of silver, and of course, in Matthew 27, we know it's for the 30 pieces of silver. And when he did, what did he end up doing? We understood from 26 that only in Matthew's do we understand. Where is it? 26. I am in 26. Give me a second here. We know that it's only in Matthew where, again, yeah, the 30 pieces of silver. Okay, it must be in 27. Where we find out that Judas hung himself. Now, why can't I find it? I'm certain it was highlighted. Oh, I know where. Let me just go right here. There we go. Matthew 27, verse 5. So in Matthew 27, verse 5, here it is, Judas hanged himself. So only in Matthew 27 do we get where Judas hanged himself. Do you understand that in relation to the prophetic timing of where Judas hanged himself, that it's when he had betrayed Jesus, right? So he betrays Jesus in 26, and in 27, here he comes, and he hangs himself, casts in the 30 pieces of silver, just like Zechariah, and then he hangs himself. Do you remember what it said? He repented himself. Judas repented himself. And it was the 30 pieces of silver that he brought to the porter of the temple. He repented himself. If the ones in John are the prophetic picture of those who were given to Christ from the Father, who are sealed with the Father's name, and there's what? None of them is lost. See, is lost. But the son of perdition. Lost. What do we know? The ones that are sealed, that belong to the Father, that were given to the Son, which we showed in Revelation 19, can't be lost. They're sealed with the Father's name on their foreheads. They cannot be lost. And if they cannot be lost, And in reality, Judas, at this point, then hangs himself. What do we know has to happen? Judas is a worker. Judas is a representation of a worker during the time of trumpets who gives Christ over, who turns on Christ in some way. But we saw in Matthew that he repents himself. We know that the trumpet workers are sealed with the Father's name written on their foreheads, that they cannot remain lost. And we take it all the way back to Numbers 20 with the second strike, which was caused by the high priest, who was Aaron, for which is the sacrificial ox that hasn't yet been sacrificed. According to Leviticus chapter 1, it was the ox, the lamb, the turtle doves. You go in reverse, it was the birth of Christ, the turtle doves, then Christ for the world, which was the lamb, and then the priestly line, which is the ox. There has to be a sacrifice because he made a covenant at the end of seals. He breaks this covenant because war is going to break out against him as the two witnesses. And why does it break out against him? Because the Judas, son of perdition, is probably the one who gave over in a typology to the son of perdition when he comes back up out of the pit. The timing is exactly the same. But the son of perdition, who is the beast that comes up out of the pit, he is not going to be redeemed, as I just showed you. He's finished. He's going into the lake of fire for eternity. And he's going to be there at the end of trumpets for the end of eternity. Judas, on the other hand, we know that Judas hasn't yet fulfilled having hung himself. This prophetic fulfillment of him hanging himself hasn't been fulfilled. Just as the Elijah in Mark of the Elijah John hasn't been fulfilled, that we were able to show you through Malachi. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. A prophetic typology of something apparently being fulfilled, or we've been taught has been fulfilled, yet Scripture reveals all around it that this thing hasn't yet been fulfilled. That's exactly what's happening. So this Judas, who's going to hang himself, which we know then is going to happen in what year? Well, check it out. We know it's going to happen in the 11th year, which is about 10 and a half years in to tribulation. It's going to happen in the 11th year. Okay? Now watch this. Remember I was telling you guys this typology in relation to periods of time, days as years and so forth? Watch this. Okay? I've shown this before, but it says the day-year principle, or year for a day principle, is a method of interpreting Bible prophecy in which the word day in prophecy is considered to be a symbolic year of actual time. I didn't make this up. I understood this through revelation of Scripture before I even knew this was a thing. And we've showed you that in relation to, without going into everything again, but what I showed you in relation to Luke 9, Mark 9, Matthew 17, in the after 6 days being after 6 years of seals, the after 6 days in Matthew being the after, there's Mark's 6 days as 6 years, there's Matthew's 6 days as 6 years, Luke's says about an 8 days, which means what? It's almost the 8th year. Why? Because the only time that's left is the 50 days above the next second set of 7 starting. So that's why Luke's says about in 8 days. It's almost the 8th year. And then after 6 days, after 6 days. That's the revelation. So you can see this, and we've shared it in many cases, many instances, to show this day for a year principle? Well, let me show it to you in this. It's not overly complicated, but I want to be detailed about it so you can understand it. We know that Jesus's death and resurrection began, as we're told here, by the angel that showed up to them in Luke chapter 24. Listen to what it says. In Luke 24, verse 6, he is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, comma, and. That means now, in addition to, you're adding this together. So, comma, and, be crucified, comma, and, in addition to, add together, the third day, rise again. Which means what? The third day began when he was delivered into the hands of sinful men, continued through to when he was crucified, and ended when he rose on the third day. Let me show you what that means. Let's go to 2024 for a picture. Passover on the 14th, okay? The Jews go from evening to evening, right? So evening to evening. Jesus, remember, evening to evening. So the 14th of Nisan, of month 1, starts over there, okay? Starts of what we would see on the evening of the 13th in Nisan. So Jesus has the Passover meal in Luke. They go out to pray. Then he's taken into the hands of sinful men. They lay their hands on him and bang, the count has begun. Okay? Taken into the hands of sinful men in the evening, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours after meal, somewhere in there. He's taken into the hands of sinful men. He's brought before them. He's crucified. And before evening comes, on what appears to be Nisan 14th, right? As long as the sun hasn't gone down, it's still the 14th. Jesus has been crucified and is now dead. And before sunset, which would be the start of the 15th, before sunset, he is taken down, wrapped, and put in the tomb. So he was taken into the hands of sinful men, crucified, and then he was in the tomb from the evening of the 15th, right? Part of the 14th, before sunset of the 15th. And he was in the tomb until what? He was in the tomb through there, and he resurrected on the 16th early in the morning. So what did you end up having? You have 1, 2, a portion of this day, and early in the morning. You have a total of about 2.5 days of when Jesus was taken into the hands of sinful men, crucified, buried, and resurrected. The total was about 2.5 days. And that is important to understand how clearly it is here in Luke 24. It began from being taken into the hands of sinful men and being crucified and resurrecting the third day. The total story is being what? Resurrected the third day. That means 2 days, and on the third day he resurrected. You have to understand that. That's why there's so many arguments and people trying to understand how do you do account if Christ had his Passover meal taken into the hands of sinful men, crucified, buried, and then it was 1, 2, 3, and then he had to resurrect over here. It's impossible. That's why there's so many arguments and debates. Oh, it must have been on a Wednesday, because the only way that could happen on a Wednesday for him to be resurrected on a Sunday and have been in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, it had to be on a Wednesday. No, it didn't. That never happened yet. The prophetic revelation in Matthew never happened because he hasn't yet fulfilled the Jonah story in any of them. The Jonah stories are all prophetic, as we said, for the end of days. So what do we see? What did happen? It was the third day, which was a total of about 2.5 days that have been fulfilled. Okay? Remember what I'm talking about here. The days to years principle. The days to years principle is what I'm talking about. So he fulfilled about 2.5 days. Watch this. When Judas betrays him and Jesus is taken into the hands of sinful men, watch this. Remember, it was 2.5 days approximately. Just so happens, it happens in John chapter 18. Okay? Partway through John chapter 18, when Jesus is taken into the hands of sinful men. All right? How much do we have left? We have, it happens partway through chapter 18 of John. We know that it lasted a total of 2.5 days, but in the end of days, if it has already been fulfilled as days, then there's a prophetic revelation connected to it as something in this lasting what? 2.5 years. So if the prophetic understanding was a period of time of betrayal to crucifixion and resurrection that lasted 2.5 days and began in John 18 partway through, and we see in John chapter 20 the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we have a prophetic picture in our chapters to years of about 2.5 years in the end of days in the second half of trumpets, which is precisely what we were told Satan had in Daniel chapter 12, when we were told in verse 7 that it shall be for time, times, and a half. There's no end. I've said this 100 times, right? There's no end like Revelation chapter 12:14. There's no end because it's not an addition in Daniel chapter 12. It's 1, 2, plus a half. Satan's time is 2.5 years until he have scattered the power of the holy people, then it shall be finished. And we know from Revelation chapter 10 that it is finished as soon as the seventh trumpet sounds. It is finished. Why is it finished as soon as the seventh trumpet sounds? Because the Lord is coming on heavenly Mount Zion, which is the end of the 13 years in the portion of truth, when the Lord will return on the clouds, as Matthew 24, feet down on the Mount of Olives, as Zechariah 14, having fulfilled a 2.5 year as days betrayal. This one is going to be 2.5 years, which is the war that breaks out against Satan and the beast, against the two witnesses. For Jesus himself told us he was the true witness. And where does Jesus tell us that he's the true witness? Check it out. Do you think it's by chance? Jesus tells us in the church at Laodicea that he is the faithful and true witness. Where are the two witnesses when war breaks out? It's in the 11th year, which is 10.5 years in, which is the timing of the betrayal by Judas. And when what? When the pit is opened and the beast comes back and Satan is there, Messiah is cut off for the 2.5 years of the war that breaks out against who? The two witnesses, of which Christ is the true witness, and he's the shepherd of Zechariah chapter 13, and his fellow who was with him, who would be the Zerubbabel. And what happens? Christ as the true witness during the period of time of what? Laodicea. The time of the apostasy, the falling away, which is mid-trumpets, the exact same time. It's exactly the same. The 2.5 days betrayal of the hands of sinful men, crucified and then resurrected the third day, is a 2.5 day represented in the chapters to years in the revelation that is going to take place against the two witnesses as a 2.5 year war, when the betrayal by the Judas of the end of days, who is going to hang himself, is connected to right here. So what's going to happen? Judas is going to hang himself in mid-trumpets. Whoever this end of days Judas is going to hang himself. But what's going to happen? He is a priest. He's part of this priestly line of end-time workers, which means he can't die. He's got to be saved. He can't be going to hell and be left in hell. So somebody's got to do something. And lo and behold, what do we know happens at the end of those 2.5 years, which were a picture of days, but they were already fulfilled in days. So in the end, prophetically, they play out as the 2.5 year war. But what happens at the end of that 2.5 year war? Well, the story of Jonah. The story of Jonah in Matthew. Because the story of Jonah in Matthew is the one that hasn't yet been fulfilled. So the 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, which hasn't yet been fulfilled, are still going to be 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth. What comes after a full 3 days and 3 nights? Do you think Jesus is going to resurrect in the middle of the night on the 4th day? Or is he going to resurrect early in the morning, probably when it's sunny out? He's going to resurrect after 3 days and after 3 nights, which means sometime, in the very least, it means sometime on the 4th day. Which, like everything else he does, is in the light. So he's going to do it most likely early in the morning, which would mean 3.5 days. Well, let's go see, when do 3.5 days get fulfilled in prophecy? Remember, he made war. That's the war that's going to last for 2.5 years that we revealed in Daniel. When Satan is cast down, he goes after them, make war for 2.5 years. And then he kills them. And when he kills them, what happens? Their dead bodies lie in the streets for what? 3 days and a half. 3 days and a half is 4 days, and sometime partway through on the 4th day, they resurrect. And what does it say? And after 3 days and a half, they stood up, and boom, they went to be with the Lord. When does it end? When did it happen? Look at this. It's even like within an hour, right? It literally says like an hour later, right here. Revelation 11:13, the same hour, there was a great earthquake. The 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain 7,000 men, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past. What is the second woe? The second woe is the end of the 13th year of tribulation. What chapter is that? It's a picture of what? He was killed, right? Being one of the two witnesses connected to the Laodicean age when he said it. Seeing that it's a 2.5 days as 2.5 years, prophetic end of days, to fulfill the 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth after he's been killed, to resurrect on the 3rd day, because he's got to go save some people. He's got to go rescue all of the priestly line, most likely throughout history. But in the prophetic understanding, he's got to get Judas. He's got to get Judas. none can be lost. None of the priestly line that belonged to the Father can be lost. And Judas, in Matthew's Judas, he repented. And look at this. He dies, he's dead, and then he resurrects. When he resurrects, where would it be? It would be like in chapter 20 of John. And lo and behold, we go to John chapter 20, which is a picture in the big story of the end of the 13th year, the end of the big picture 20. And look at what it says in John chapter 9, one of the other places in the Synoptic Gospels, the only other place besides Matthew. John 20, verse 9, for as yet, listen to this, they knew not the scripture. For as yet, does Mark, Matthew, or Luke say this? Nope. Only John's. For as yet they knew not the scripture, that he must rise again from the dead. This is prophecy, guys. Was it another way of saying something that did take place? Yes. But is the wording actually laid in there for us for the prophetic understanding? Absolutely, unequivocally, 100% yes. Do you think it's a wonder why it's a picture of the end of the 20th or the end of the 13th year of tribulation, which is the end of the 6th trumpet, and he resurrects? You see what's going on? This is truth, guys. This is the revelation. You see how awesome that was? 2.5 days approximately, equaling approximately 2.5 years in the end of days. Because it was already fulfilled as days, now this battle is going to be fulfilled as years. And when the battle is over, he's going to be killed for the Aaron line, for the Levitical priestly line, who was the type of Judas who died in hanging himself, but repented of it for what he had done. In the 30 coins of Matthew's portion, which he threw into the potter of the temple, because the temple was rebuilt in the first half of trumpets, to which we then see in Zechariah chapter 11, when the cutoff happens, to which by the end of chapter 13 of Zechariah, we see when he's going to get pierced. It's so incredible. It's so incredible. So what we found out in all of this is that there is another Judas. Does it mean his name is going to be Judas? Does it mean the coming Elijah John types and the Elijah John Moses types that they're going to be called Elijah or Moses? No. They're typologies. These are pictures. These are events that are written right there in the scriptures for us that have not yet happened. Or only portions of these things have been completed in one portion of a picture. But the entirety of the rest of it is prophecy. Right there, layered throughout all of the Gospels. Isn't that fascinating? It blows me away. I was going to share on this one. I may have touched on it a while ago, like a long time ago. But this picture right here of the 2.5 days as 2.5 years in the end, before he's killed, so that he could be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights and resurrect on the 4th day. It's so mind-blowing to see. Let me show you this in Matthew. Check this out. Listen to what they say about it in Matthew. Listen to this. Yeah, listen to this. So in Matthew 27, starting in verse 62, again, you only see this in Matthew. Now the next day that followed, the day of the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days, I will rise again. Look at what they're saying. They came to him now the next day that followed the day of preparation, which means they're there kind of like resurrection day. Right? After the crucifixion, they're there, but they're talking about what? After 3 days. Didn't I just show you something about after 3 days? Do you know that all of the other scriptures, like 14 or 15 places, says on the third day? Did you see what it said? After 3 days. What did it just say in Revelation chapter 11 at the sixth trumpet? After the 2.5-year war that takes place? It would be after 3 days. Right? 3 days and 3 nights is sometime after 3 days. And now listen to what they say next. This is awesome. In verse 64, again, only find this in Matthew. Commanded therefore that the sepulchre be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, he is risen from the dead. Listen to this. So that the last error shall be worse than the first. Do you see the prophetic implication there? So that the last error, so that this last time of him doing it would be far worse than the first one. Of course, because the last one, when he does it, he is going to return feet down on the Mount of Olives with power and glory for the whole world to see him, destroy all of the enemies, cast them into the lake of fire, throw Satan into the pit for 1,000 years, and rule and reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords for 1,000 years. Of course, the last error for these guys will be even worse than the first was. Brothers and sisters, it's so awesome. You know, it's always, brutal to see this understanding of what Christ is going to do again. But when you understand the purpose and the truth of the revelation of it, it's still difficult to handle. But it makes complete sense that he would do it. It makes complete sense. We saw that there were 2 strikes. We know that Moses was told to speak to the rock. And while he's there and Aaron's standing there with him, he strikes the rock twice. Jesus dies for all the people when he came for the first time to make up for the Moses strike, because Moses represented all of Israel. And we know that Aaron did not represent all of Israel, but belonged to the Father. They had no portion with the tribes. They have no portion of land when this is all done either, because theirs is the Father's. And there's a second strike, the one represented by the ox, that must happen again to fulfill and complete the story. You see? Because, brothers and sisters, the revelation of the open books is the truth. It is the Torah, the beginning. It is the 13 years to when the Lord returns, feet down, destroys all the enemies as it was in the days of Noah in Matthew 24, that final 14th year. And when it's all over, it's the 22nd year and the final Jubilee. What do we know it in the end of days as we share and discuss it? Because the 7 easy years, once they're done and the tribulation of the 14 years begins, we know it started with Feast of Weeks, then it's 6 years of seals, and the 7th year rest, the gathering to the Lord. Then it is 6 years of trumpets, The Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives, destroys all of the enemies, and then those from Revelation 12:14 who were flown away on wings of an eagle till the end of the 14th year, that final year is done. Then that 15th year, which is the same as the 22nd year, is the final Jubilee, when the restoration of all will be returned to them, and they will be given their portions of lands, not the priestly line because they belong to the fathers, but all the tribes will be given their portion of land. What is this revelation of the end of days? You guys already know it, as I'll finish it with this. It is the story of the three feasts, the revelation of the three feasts of the Lord, 717. It will begin with the middle one of the Feast of Weeks of the pre-trib bride of Christ. Then it'll be the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days, the bread of affliction, for which it is 6 days unleavened bread, and on the 7th day, a solemn assembly, exactly like 7 days as 7 years. 6 of them, unleavened bread, and on the 7th day, a solemn assembly of the great multitude rapture. And then it's the 7 days as 7 years for the week of tabernacles, for the 7 years of trumpets. And when the 7 days of tabernacles are done, it is the 8th day, which from the Feast of Tabernacles, the 8th day is called, I believe, Shmini Aretz, and it means new beginning. Days, years, days, years, days, years. It's all over the place. And the revelation in it all for tonight was to understand that indeed Judas is that priestly line during trumpets who is going to some sort betray Christ when the pit is opened and the beast comes back. His is the representation of those 30 coins. His is the representation when Messiah is cut off. And it is the is to come fulfillment of a Judas in the end of days of trumpets, who is represented by the Judas who is then hung or hung himself. Brothers and sisters, I pray this blesses you. It was a fairly deep, fairly straightforward, yet deep dive at the same time to understand that it's all there. Every part of it. Consider everything we've been revealed over these past several years. And every storyline of every portion of every piece that's been revealed is in its place. To the word, to the chapter, many times to the verse, from beginning to end, from Genesis to Revelation. And it is all founded on the revelation of who the Gospels are speaking to. It's awesome. I know I say it all the time, but I'm so excited once I get through doing a video, or in the midst of a video when I get through doing it. I usually can't get to sleep for a few hours either, because I am just so in awe. I just shake my head and say, man, have we ever been blessed? I can't understand why, I know that. But we have undoubtedly been blessed to understand the revelation of Jesus Christ, the revelation of his open book for the end of days. And that will never, ever just sit easy with me as no big deal. I ponder these things every day in studying and in bringing about the revelations, in tying these pieces together. I can never, ever tire of it. Because when you realize it's the truth of Christ that he is revealing to us of himself, to prepare for the time of the end, mind blown every single time. Brothers and sisters, I love you. I thank you always. I pray for you. I pray for your families. I thank you for all of your prayers, for all of your support, for us and throughout the ministry, for our brother Steve in Uganda and his team. If you can, please remember, help us if you can. Help spread the word and let us reach many, many more for Christ in salvation and in the readiness, as we have shown and revealed here tonight, to prepare a group of people for the Lord for this coming pre-trib and remnant worker bride. I love you guys. God bless you and your families. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.